Good evening, everybody. This is Josh from VE, along with Pippa and Peter here in the
Hello.
office, and we're really excited to come to you live with one of our very first Google Hangouts for more information about volunteering with VE Global in Santiago, Chile. I'd like to introduce you to Peter, who is a current VE volunteer. He's working right now at Domingo Savio, which he can tell you much more about as we get started. And Pippa, who is a development and communications intern in the office. And we're also joined by Mariah Healy. Mariah is a former director of programs and also did a fair share of volunteering during her time here with VE as well. So welcome, Mariah.
Thank you.
And Pippa, maybe you can start off by introducing yourself a little bit more and telling us about your work and start a conversation with Peter about his current volunteer experience.
Yeah. So I'm Pippa, I'm from the UK and I'm studying at university in the UK. So I'm here on my year abroad from university and I'm working as a development and communications intern for around 9 months in Chile. And I decided to come to VE because it seemed like such a great organisation, such a good international community that has such a great mission and vision. And it's been such a great experience so far, so I definitely recommend it to everyone who's watching. And just introduce yourself, Peter, if you'd like to.
So, Peter Roth. I'm a volunteer at Domingo Savio, which is a community center for boys from 5 to 15, 6 to 15, I guess, just had a birthday. And so my background is graduated with a degree in psychology and did software design for a little bit. And I'm looking to go into education, and it's kind of worked in perfectly with my plans to teach English abroad for a year. And what really brought me to VE for the first time was a really close friend of mine had done VE, and she had like amazing things to say about it, and she's a really smart girl, is doing really cool things, so I took her word as a good program. And yeah, so since I've been here, it's been amazing. Yeah.
Cool. So why Chile specifically? Did you decide to come to Chile?
Different reasons. So one, I'm looking to teach afterwards. There's lots of opportunities, lots of demand for English teaching here. The public education system is lacking, especially in English education. So they're really looking to have English teachers, and you know that you're going to make a difference teaching English in Chile. Santiago as a city was a clear benefit for me, just because you know you're heading somewhere safe, somewhere developed, and so if you're considering that kind of thing, Santiago was reassuring for me. And then also just I love the outdoors, and Santiago is a city right near the mountains, constant ability to escape to the mountains on a weekend. I actually haven't yet because I've been doing other things, but it's nice to know that it's there. Yeah.
Yeah, so talking about your schedule and your day-to-day working sort of life in Domingo Savio, what's that like?
So in Domingo Savio, the day starts with preparing for all the kids to get there. So we make a big meal for the staff, and usually there's about 4 or 5 of the younger kids who are eating with us during that meal. So I'm not cooking, but I set the table and clean up around the home while the meal's being prepared. During the meal, this is all in Spanish, so at first during the meal was mostly me just listening to Spanish and trying to catch what I could. But we'll discuss kind of what the plans are for the day, what the plans are for the week. The staff will discuss issues going on if there aren't kids present, etc. Then after that, there'll be about an hour typically before all the kids start their official kind of talleres and talleres is workshops for English speakers. Talleres or homework time or whatever is planned for the day. So during that time, we'll be hanging out with the kids, playing soccer, foosball, childish imagination games, whatever the kids decide to do. Then homework time is split into two groups. I'm with the younger group, and then there's an older group. And I love being with the younger guys. It's been eventually I want to be teaching with kids of that age. Not sure exactly what age I want to get into, but somewhere within the 5 to 12. And right now I'm working with like 6 to 10-year-olds. So I've just gained so much insight into what it's like to teach children, how children learn, what it's like to interact with. Because I've had a good amount of experience interacting with children in a summer camp type of environment, but not in a more teaching-focused world. And Domingo Savio is by no means a school, but there's a lot of opportunities to see what it's like for a kid to go through a learning process, for classroom management, for group management, and activities that have a real learning purpose. So yeah, we do that for a while. We have once, which is their kind of night snack, and then we'll maybe do another workshop, or it'll be just more playtime as the kids get ready to head home. And yeah, so should I talk about like what those workshops might be?
Yeah.
So the workshops, different people, volunteers and staff members included, within Domingo Savio have different specialties, themes of workshops that they do. So the Tia Olga, who is the one who founded the home, which started off as an orphanage, and now is a community center, she'll run very elaborate art workshops. These kids are producing like incredible stuff, and she's been doing it for years. So she's got like this whole kind of system of how to take 6-year-olds and make them create these masterpieces. But they love it, and that happens with her about 2 times a week with each group. Tia Corolla will do cooking workshops. As a volunteer, I really have the ability to do whatever type of workshop comes to mind. So one workshop I did was just basically teaching kids to think about how to use a browser and a search engine. So the kids would come up with whatever questions as a group they thought was most interesting, and then they would pick one question that seemed fun and searchable on Google, and then each of them was split into groups, and these are little kids, and they're learning how to use a search like Chrome and Google for the first time, and understanding, so they search these questions, come up with an answer, and present it to the group. So they realized, first of all, just they can access all information on the internet, and kind of realizing that there are questions that they find interesting and that they can go about finding those answers themselves. Other examples, I could do science workshops. I've done English workshops. The other volunteer, so there's this whole list of of a lot of talleres that past volunteers have done, and so you can look and see what all the other volunteers have done and draw ideas from their workshops, etc. So yeah, it's just this big growing database, and everyone can do whatever interests them, whatever they think will interest the kids, whatever the staff is looking for. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Peter, for sharing a little bit about your experience in the day-to-day as a volunteer. And we'll definitely come back to you, too, for a question about specifically what you found to be your most rewarding experience so far at VE. But I'd like to introduce everybody to Katya. as well, who's also joined us. Hi, Katya.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good. How about
Good to
y'all?
see you.
Okay, sounds good.
So Katya is a
Sorry.
former volunteer who can maybe tell us a little bit about her experience now as well. Maybe tell us a little bit, Katya, about where you are now, when you were with VE, where did you volunteer, and maybe what your most memorable experience or kind of the most rewarding opportunity you had as a VE volunteer when you were here.
Okay, so I am originally from Mexico, and right now I am in Texas studying in UT. And so when I was living in Santiago with VE Global, I was in an hogar, Pleiades, and basically it's a private home for small kids from the ages of say 2 to 10. At the moment, when I was working in Pleiades, there were 8 kids, and some leave while you're working there, and new little kids come. But you really do, like at least in my experience, I got to really bond with them, and they became like my own children. So I really love that bond, and you get to hear new stories and learn how to evolve with these children because they're definitely children at social risk, and at sometimes, yes, it is tough to deal with their experiences and know how to act around them. But if you give it time, you definitely learn a lot from these kids. I think you end up learning more from them than they learn from you. And so in the end, I fell in love with my experience, and I love these kids, and I still send them videos and messages, and I'm still with them after it's been 8 months, 9, 10 that I haven't been there, but I'm still very focused with Hogar Pleiades. So yes, that's
That's great.
my experience.
And how did the experience that you had with Pleiades and working as a VE volunteer kind of affect now your path where you're at? Has it made a difference in kind of your post VE volunteer time? Like, how has it influenced your life since?
So definitely volunteering abroad. It didn't mean that I want to focus working with kids, but it definitely did make me want to travel more and learn more about cultures, and it did change my major. So because I got to live in in Chile and travel while being in my volunteer program, now I changed my major to cultural anthropology, which is understanding cultures from all around the world. So definitely in that sense, VE and my experience helped me want to learn more about different regions and how they work, and yeah, that it did help me in that sense to see what I wanted in life.
Great, that's great. Good. Well, thank you, Katia, for sharing a little bit about your experience. And as I mentioned before, we also have Mariah here with us, who spent many years with us at VE as well, not only as a program director, but also having done her fair share of volunteering in a number of different partner organizations where we work. Mariah, maybe you can share a little bit about your personal VE story and how it's kind of affected your professional path, and maybe what your most significant VE memory is of your time.
That's a tricky question. Okay, so I arrived in Santiago in December of 2008 as a volunteer. And just a few months later, there was a position open in the office for like the volunteer coordinator type position. So I took that position and ended up staying about 5 more years at VE. I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary of being out of Chile, and I'm feeling very sad and sentimental about it. VE was a very, very important and beautiful part of my life for a long time. For me, what made VE so wonderful and special was the community aspect of the organization. You arrive with a group of volunteers who have the same sort of goals and some of the same interests as you, and you get to go through these really challenging but rewarding experiences together. And VE is really great about providing opportunities to sort of debrief the experiences you're having. So maybe you have a really tough moment with a kid who's had a really tough life, so it's normal that the kid would be struggling. And whereas at some organizations maybe you would just be left to sort of process that on your own and just feel frustrated or sad or angry, etc. But with VE you have all these opportunities to talk to your peers and to the staff about what's going on, and everyone helps you brainstorm solutions for an issue. So I always felt so supported at VE, and like I had the opportunity to learn so much, both from the other volunteers and from the staff. And then when I was part of the staff, it was so fun to get to meet each class of volunteers that came in, people from all around the world. I have friends in a million different countries now, which is just a really like rich and wonderful thing. And it was really wonderful to watch the volunteers go through this experience of the struggles of getting to know their kids and learning how to deal with tricky behavior, and watching volunteers have success was really, really special. And yes, so I got to volunteer at 2 different children's homes, and they were both for all girls. The first home where I worked there for about 2 years, and then they shut down. But then I started working at a pretty similar girls' home. And so I would go once a week. Normally volunteers go Monday through Friday, but because I was working in the office, I would just go once a week. And it was so special to have relationships with these kids over multiple years and getting to see them grow up and have successes. There was a really special moment where this girl who really struggled with reading, and she was like 12 years old and still couldn't read. A lot of volunteers worked really hard with her, and we did this activity at the home one day where all the girls were reading out loud, and this girl read out loud, and it was just this really mind-blowing, wonderful thing that I had seen her struggle for years with reading. So obviously people usually just stay for maybe 4 months, 6 months, 8 months. You don't get to see, over multiple years. But rest assured that because there is a constant stream of volunteers, there are always people working with these kids and helping them with these skills that they might struggle with. It's hard to pick just one really special VE moment, but I would say that one of my most wonderful experiences was with the kids in the home where I worked. They spend about a month every summer at this other home in a city that's on the coast called Viña del Mar. And I went and lived with the girls for a week, and it was totally bonkers, totally crazy. And I was with them at every meal and putting them to bed and reading them stories, but it was just the most amazing week. And it felt like a really special opportunity to get to share with them. And I think that's something great about VE. You get sort of this special access to opportunities that you might not have otherwise. It's a really special place.
Definitely. Thanks, Mariah. It's great to hear your VE history, and tell us what you're doing now and how VE has affected your career path, if at all.
Nah.
No, I know the answer is yes. So.
Well, so I'm now working at another nonprofit organization called Safe Passage that works in Guatemala, and I had actually volunteered with this organization for just about 5 weeks right after I graduated from college. And what Safe Passage does is pretty amazing. There's this garbage dump in Guatemala City where thousands of people work scavenging to make their livelihood by finding things they can recycle or sell or eat or build their home with. And 15 years ago, children were allowed to be in this dump, and so the woman that founded Safe Passage sort of saw this situation and decided to, she was from Maine, like me, in the US, and she decided to sell her car and sell her computer and she started this organization just getting these kids out of the dump and into school. And now we work with almost 600 kids. We get them enrolled in school, and then they come have sort of like a community center educational reinforcement situation at our main building, and we have an adult literacy program for the parents and just lots of cool different programs. We have a health clinic so the kids and families can come get health care. So we work in Guatemala City. There's about 100 Guatemalan employees, so it's a much larger organization than VE in scope. And then we have a U.S. office in Maine, really close to my house, and there are just 7 of us who work there. So I work sort of doing development work, especially with our child sponsorship program, and doing outreach. I actually just got back from a month-long trip driving down the East Coast talking about safe passage to anyone who would listen, basically. So I think that, you know, working at VE and working with these kids really solidified for me that that's the type of work that I always want to do. And I may get a master's in social work at some point, but right now it's pretty interesting for me to be learning a lot about development within a nonprofit, and I think that that's a very useful skill to have. And so who knows what I'll end up studying, but I'm definitely grateful for my time at VE and the skills that I learned.
Great.
Thanks to Josh.
Thanks, Mariah. Well, we'll definitely have some more questions for you, but I want to go back to see if Peter can share now maybe a little bit about, so far, you've been here since September. Kind of in your time as a volunteer, if there's a particular moment or kind of some important kind of memory that you have of a very rewarding moment for you in your time as a volunteer so far.
Well, it doesn't seem to manifest itself in a particular moment. It's more lots and lots of moments that slowly have emerged, and especially now that I'm learning, I can communicate on a level in Spanish that I couldn't before. Starting to have real conversations with these kids and connect with them in ways that wasn't happening at the very start. And after a conversation, where you feel like you really, really share something with this kid that you've known for 2 months. And you realize, oh wow, like I've really developed a bond with this kid, and you can see kids starting to look up to you, or you can see that these little threads that you're sharing with them will make a slight impact for the rest of their lives. So lots of little conversations like that, but on the more kind of emotional connection side, have just been incredibly fulfilling. And then also things like in the classroom, because I'm working with such young kids, they learn things that will be useful for the rest of their lives. So if they're learning how to multiply, they might learn that over the 2 months. There's been kids who have come in with no ability, no conceptual understanding of multiplication, who can now, or they might be using like the counting out all of the multiples method, but they can now do all of the multiplication tables. And so it's really cool to be able to work with kids over 2 weeks and see that progress happen right there. Or see kids who are sounding out new syllables, who at the start of 2 months ago could barely read, a sentence, who can now fluidly read a whole sentence. So that's been really kind of the emotional side, and then the more kind of concrete, I'm watching this side, have been kind of very, very rewarding for me over these 2 months. And the moments are happening more and more often now, and I only see more and more of them happening as our bonds grow stronger, the mutual respect we have for each other grows stronger. I understand what their needs are as individuals and as a group more. So yeah, it's so even just getting to that point where now these moments are happening more often is rewarding in and of itself. So yeah, overall it's just, I've never had a period in my life where I go to go to bed feeling like without fail fulfilled, and waking up confident that I'm going to be doing something that will put me to bed fulfilled that night as well. So that's been a very, very cool experience.
That's great. That's great. And I think an interesting question that brings up for me is knowing that we have a 4-month minimum volunteer commitment. Do you feel like that commitment? I don't know. Maybe I feel sometimes that I've talked with volunteers before they come that think that might seem like a really long time. But in the way you were just talking about how you feel like you're just getting into a stride, do you feel like 4 months is a good commitment length? Is it something that should be, like, how is the time commitment length felt to you in terms of your experience?
So for me, I'm always thinking, I wish that this is the start of I was where I am right now at the start of my 4 months. Because of that. Because part of it's the language. If I had known the language going right in, I might not have that feeling like, oh, I wish I had more time. But especially because I'm still learning the language, it creates this like, oh wow, if I could do 2 more months all knowing the language, that'd be amazing. I think the 4-month commitment worked out well for me when I was planning on coming here, just in terms of I'm applying for English teaching jobs, and the hiring season is February, March, which and kind of comes the vacation kind of ends and takes me into the next school year. So logistically it makes sense, but yeah, I think 4 months, 4.5 months, which is what I've done, right? I will do. That does I get that as a minimum. Makes complete sense as as an absolute minimum. And I am sure that almost all of the volunteers who come here leave wishing that they could have more time.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I've heard that a lot. Katya, maybe you can share a little bit about that same question. Like, how did you feel like the time commitment that you had was in terms of your overall experience? Was 4 months enough? Was it too much? Was it not enough?
Honestly, the time flew by. I definitely wish I could have done a longer time. One, because after 4 months you get so close to your kids, and for me leaving them, it was so sad, and I wanted to see more of them. And 4 months also, you meet new people, not just in your program, but also outside of your program. You meet Chileans, and then your new friends also from BE Global, and so you get used to them, and then after 4 months it's like gone. So definitely I would love to stay more, and maybe a year if I could have had the time to see these kids progress and learn more from them. So yeah, definitely if anyone has the chance to take more than 4 months, I would definitely recommend it. It is not too long of a period. I feel like it's 4 seconds. It goes by so fast, and for those who are learning Spanish, you need more time. You do learn a lot, but you definitely need more time to learn more. And so definitely, as Peter, right?
Yeah.
Peter said. Okay. Okay, as Peter said, yeah. Oh, sorry, I forgot my train of thought. But as Peter said, yeah, it does fly by, and you always wish you could have started at the last point in the beginning. I don't know if that means sense. So my last month, I wish it had started like that in the first month, because the amount of things you've already done and experienced is so much. So with more time, it could have expanded. So yeah, it's not enough time. That's my opinion. It's not enough time.
Yeah, speaking to that, the not enough time in their home or the community center, wherever you are. Definitely agree that I'm feeling that, like, oh, I'm establishing this life in Santiago, and now I'm applying for teaching jobs all over Chile and all over South America, and more and more intensely trying to make sure that those jobs end up in Santiago, because I've got this VE group here. I've got this. If I was in Chile, I could probably be with Domingo Savio, and then I've also got this social life and his attachment to the city developing, and it is hard to leave that end of things as well after 4.5 months. So
Yeah.
to really, and there's one type of traveling which is going from place to place and seeing the world, which I was never like that interested in, but I was always really interested in actually living in another area. And I thought 4 months was living in another city, but after being here, I mean, I do feel like I'm a citizen of, or not a citizen, a member of the city of Santiago, but I keep wanting more and more and more. I want to feel like this is like really my city because I'm loving the city and I'm loving the experience of living in a completely new country, new place. So.
Yeah, that's great. Katya, can you tell us a little bit more about another thing that you brought up that I think is important to talk about is kind of the volunteer group that you came with and what the experience for you was of making connections with people in your volunteer class. So as you know, obviously, and as we all sit here and talk about our volunteer classes, we have volunteers that arrive in September, January, and May, and you go through kind of a cycle together. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what the volunteer experience meant to you from working and having fellow volunteers in your group at the same time.
All right, so for anyone who's listening, my advice is to be global because it's a smaller volunteer program, so you get to be more. Sorry, I forget English words, but more concentrated, so you get to see the same people, every week and experience and hear their stories and learn together and evolve together in this experience. And with V Global, I got to meet one of my best friends. She's from Germany, Teresa, and she's my rock. So definitely this program gave me a new friend. I travel with her all the time, so it's definitely worth it to find yourself in a smaller volunteer program rather than the big ones, because then you feel more like a family. It's more compact, and yeah, you get to see one another more, and definitely sharing experiences and learning them does help you learn how to apply their stories into your life with the kids. And yeah, so their skills they'll teach you. I don't know how to explain it, but definitely being with V Global and meeting every week, every Tuesday, and hearing everyone speak about their problems with their program or their happy moments or anything compared to that, close to that, definitely was rewarding, and I definitely loved V Global. And every week you send your, I forgot the name in English, but every week you send your report on how you did and the things that you struggled in and the amazing things that happened in your hogar. And then Glim, which is one of the leaders in V Global, would help us and reply back. I would always forget to send mine, but definitely when I would come in every Tuesday, she would help me out, and so would Josh and also the other volunteers. So I would definitely recommend being in small nonprofit volunteer programs because you make a family. So yeah, that's my opinion.
Oh, definitely. I think that's great. I think the value of community that we have really is important in that regard, and allows us, because we are a smaller organization that way, to develop really strong relationships with one another so that we can all support each other throughout that time. Which I think, Mariah, since we have you here with us as well, and I think that this is a question that's maybe like perfect for you in terms of talking a little bit more about the volunteer orientation and training and support piece, kind of as the director of programs. Before, those were big pieces of your role, and how do you see now, or what do you think are the strongest or most important kind of components of the volunteer support and training that we provide that would be, I think, maybe important for potential volunteers that might be watching to understand about in terms of what type of support and training that they get from VE during their commitment?
Sure. Well, there's a big
It's a big question. Well, while you're thinking about your...
No, I said there's a big echo.
Oh, a big echo. Well, still on that point, while you're thinking about your answer and we're dealing with the big echo, I just want to remind anyone who might be watching that's interested in asking any questions in the Hangout, there should be, if everything is working the way it's supposed to, there should be a Q&A button that you can push, and then a side window will open up where you can chat your questions, and any of the people on the Hangout can then answer those specific questions that you may have. So if there is anyone interested in something specific that they would like to get the answer to, please don't hesitate to chat that question to us. And now, back to Mariah.
So I think that VE is very unique in the amount of effort and care that it puts into orienting its volunteers and preparing its volunteers for their work. Orientation is a 2-week process. Is it still 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Okay. You know, when I was a volunteer, when I came in a class, orientation was 1 week, and it was still really wonderful, but there are just a lot of topics that, you know, volunteers should know about as they're starting their work. So Josh and I worked really hard on sort of expanding the orientation program while I was there. And, you know, there's just a little bit of everything. There's a session about culture shock. There's a session about how to live cheaply in Santiago, because it's not necessarily the cheapest place. There's a session on health and safety. There's a session on, you know, there's sessions on all the different aspects of VE, so that coming into the organization, you learn really thoroughly how the organization works. And I think it's really important, especially since our volunteers are sort of representatives of VE in the community in Santiago. So it's important that the volunteers understand all the different aspects of VE. And I think it's that's pretty unique, and that's, you know, that's giving the volunteers a lot of really useful information. And there are sessions on Chilean slang and sessions on how to create a workshop. You know, just really anything you could think of that you might need to know before you start volunteering with kids. And I think one of my favorite aspects of the VE orientation is that the current volunteers are so involved in the process. So as Josh said, volunteers come every 4 months and have to stay for at least 4 months. So when a group of volunteers is arriving, there's a group of volunteers that has been there for 4 months that then participate in the orientation for that new group. So whether it's participating in sort of a question and answer advice session, or whether it's making meals for the new volunteers for during the 2 weeks, you know, the current volunteers are really involved. And when I arrived, my orientation, that was what was so baffling to me and made me feel like I had found a really special place, because everyone was so passionate about their work with VE and so passionate about the organization itself and wanting to keep it great, that everyone just put such a great effort into making sure that the new volunteers had a good experience. And so I think it's a very welcoming place. I think that it's rare that volunteers feel homesick when they arrive, because they arrive with a group of people and they arrive to a group of people that has been there, that has advice for them, and it's just a very friendly place, and it can be a very silly place, and I think that that's an important thing for volunteers to learn, how to be silly so that they can then be silly with the kids, because that's something that the kids are sometimes lacking, is just that sort of one-on-one attention with a grown-up who's going to take the time to be goofy with them, because that's sort of the situation that these kids are living in. The staff people that work at these organizations are overworked and underpaid, and they have way too much to do, and they don't have the time or the patience to like sit around and just do something goofy. And so that's where the volunteers are this really unique resource for the kids. You know, the volunteers, all they have is time. they have so much time to spend with the kids and teach them to be goofy. So yeah.
Yeah, and we actually just got back from Jornada, which I know is one of Mariah's most favorite VE events. And I'm wondering about that, like if you have anything to say about like the Jornada experience or the continuing education and training that goes on after orientation throughout the volunteers experience, and how that's developed over time as well, and what that means as part of the experience as well.
Yeah. So another very unique thing I think about VE is that VE is constantly trying to build up the volunteers' tool belts. Sort of, working with kids requires a lot of different skills and a lot of different types of patience, and so every other week we have a continued education session. So the volunteers are constantly learning, and that might be a psychologist that comes in and does a workshop on sexual abuse and sort of what the signs are in kids, and how maybe you can work with kids through some of their sort of frustrating behaviors, and some of those sessions are more sort of cultural and historical, so that the volunteers can be more thoroughly understanding sort of the cultural context of Santiago, which is a very interesting place politically and historically. And I think that sort of people's behavior, just like Chileans' behavior, is very affected by recent history. And so I think it's important for volunteers to start getting a sense of where people are coming from. And then, so Jornada is our mid-service retreat. And I'm not sure where they do it now, but we always go to a beautiful place, and it's a weekend to be away from Santiago and away from the kids and away from whatever sort of buzzy life you have in Santiago, which is a very buzzy city, and away from internet, and it's a time to reflect on how the work is going so far, and a time to brainstorm, and a time to bond as a group, which makes the volunteers, I think, happier and more comfortable and more refreshed to go back and do their work, which can be very tiring. And so I think that volunteers get the chance to really also learn so much about themselves, because there are so many opportunities for reflection. And I don't think a lot of other organizations provide that. And so I think that's a very special thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think it'd be great if the three of you could maybe think about some advice, maybe one piece of advice that you would give to people thinking about applying to VE, and then maybe we can speak to Josh before that so you have some time to think. And maybe Josh, you can talk about the partner organisations that we work with and where the volunteers go to when they work with VE.
Sure, yeah. So as I think Peter brought up a little bit about his partner organization, and then both Katia and Mariah talked a little bit about working in children's homes. We have a number of different partner organizations that we work with here in Santiago. We work primarily with children's homes that are for kids that have been removed from their homes because of abuse or neglect in their families, and they're in the process of either going through some type of family reinsertion process or the adoption process. And then we also work with a community center, Domingo Savio, where the volunteers work in a type of after-school program type situation. So that's a little bit different than the children's homes. And then we also work with a school called Colegio Anaquena, which is a school for children with special needs. And so we have a very diverse kind of set of placement organizations, or partner organizations as we call them, where we place the volunteers based on a number of different factors, ranging from what the volunteers' personal interests are in terms of where they would like to work and what type types of groups of kids that they would like to work with, but also really making sure that we fit the right volunteers with the right partner organizations as well. One of our newer partner organizations is Home for Teenage Mothers who are also in situations of abuse, neglect, and abandonment. And this new home that we work with is called Refugio, and it's another example of a children's home that we work with. Katia worked at a smaller home for younger kids that were and are still at Pleiades in the process of adoption. But then there are other types of children's homes placements that we work with as well.
Great. So as the executive director of VE, what's exciting at the moment? What have we got coming up that could be of interest to future volunteers and that future volunteers can be involved with?
No, definitely a good question. I think that two really, really great things have happened for us recently, and it's two grants that we've won from the Chilean government to fund some of our programs during 2016. So the first grant that we've won is a really exciting opportunity for us that gives us the chance to create a new program. We're going to begin a program called Soy Independiente, which is a life skills program, a series of workshops for young people that live in the children's homes that we work with and others as well, that will be able to participate in a training program that we'll be designing for next year that will give them the opportunity to come to do some training workshops with us in order to learn some life skills that are sometimes there's not enough time or resources in the children's homes where we work to make sure that there's a focus on getting some of the youth that we work with that are going to be transitioning into independent living to get them ready for that. And so we're really excited that we're going to have the opportunity to develop this workshop series next year. I think that's going to be really exciting for our volunteers because although they won't be leading those workshops on their own, there will be plenty of opportunity for volunteers to be involved in helping to shape and run that program as well. And then the other very exciting news that we just recently got was that we also won a government grant to fund our volunteer program or parts of our volunteer program into next year as well. And so all of the training and orientation and continuing education and jornada and all of those things that Mariah shared a little bit about, we have some funding provided by the government to help us expand those opportunities, to make them even stronger, to get our partner organizations even more involved in those opportunities as well for training that we have. And so I think those two grants are really exciting for us in terms of what's going to be happening in 2016 for VE.
Yeah, great. So maybe now we can go to each of you and get some pieces of advice that you would give to people maybe watching thinking, oh, I'm thinking of applying, I'm not sure. What would you say to them?
I would say make sure you look everything over carefully. If you're on this watching this what's it called, web conference? Web conference. It sounds very formal. If you're watching this web conference, then you're probably doing some research. But I think if you research it a lot and it seems like something you really want to do, don't let fear or doubts about the organization or anything hold you back, because this is an organization that is incredibly supportive of the volunteers and the people who come here. I know I was worried that I was just going to get thrown into the fire and maybe was going to be in like a situation that I wasn't happy with at whatever program I was placed in. I wasn't sure what program I was going to be placed in, but the interview process, they really get to know the applicants and they make sure that that the applicants coming in are people who are right for the program. So if you know that, okay, I'm willing to put in lots of hours, and I understand that working with kids can be crazy and difficult, and but also I know down deep that it's probably one of the most amazing things for me. Well, now I'm just speaking for myself, but to also know that it's such a great experience, then you should probably apply, and I wouldn't let fear hold you back. My piece of advice for an applicant.
Great. So maybe we can go to Katya next, and see if you have any advice for people considering applying.
All right, so for my experience, I just say do it. Either if you're not sure or you want to do it, just do it. If you're scared, still do it, because I promise you won't regret it. At least none of the volunteers I met regretted it. They all had fantastic experiences. Each one of us definitely had different experiences, but we all, in the end, loved it, and we all wanted to stay more time and everything. So I guess if you're thinking about it, it's because deep inside you want to do it. So now is the time, better than any other time, and I promise you that doing it with VE Global, they'll help so much the process, and it's just such a great experience. You get to travel, you get to learn a new language, you get to meet new people, you get to learn from little kids, you get to learn from an organization that loves helping people in need. So definitely do it. Don't be scared. Go for it. That's my advice.
Great, thanks. And over to you, Mariah. What would you say to anyone watching?
Well, so my advice would sort of be for somebody who's already at VE or doing really any similar experience abroad is to just try not to sweat the small stuff and try not to get hung up on, oh God, I just said this thing wrong in Spanish. Just try to really put it all out there. Just really try to live each moment. If you're lost, go up to a stranger and ask them for directions, because that's going to be a little bit scary, but then you're going to accomplish something, and celebrate all the little things that are a little bit more challenging, like just going to the grocery store in a foreign country. Just really try not to get caught up in anxieties and things that you're anxious about trying, because I think you learn a lot about yourself, and you learn a lot about just the world by being exposed to a different culture, and I think it just shifts your perspective in a way that's so powerful. Yeah, don't let fear stop you, I guess, is the theme. So that's great.
Great. Thank you, Mariah and Katya and Peter, or Pedro, as I have gotten very, very used to calling him lately. And thank you, Pippa, as well, for helping guide this conversation for us. I think just to kind of end, it would be great to remind people that our current deadline for the next volunteer class, which is starting in January of 2016, the current deadline for applications for that next class is Tuesday, December 8th. So you still have plenty of time to put your application materials together. And I would just encourage you all, I hope that everyone can see on their screen, our website. There's lots of information on the website about volunteering, the information about our commitment, in terms of having a full-time 4-month minimum commitment. Another really important piece of VE, I think, that we haven't talked about so far is the fact that we are a no-fee volunteer program. That means that we don't charge an application fee, nor do we charge a program fee for participation. And I think that's something that makes VE really, really special in terms of our position as an international nonprofit organization that's focused on volunteering, because most other organizations do charge some kind of program fee. And we've been really lucky for our first 10 years as an organization to be able to continue not charging that program fee because of the generous efforts of our volunteers and the rest of our community at making sure that through fundraising efforts we can continue to keep VE program fee-free, if that makes sense. But there's a lot of other really great resources on the website that might help you in terms of answering many questions. If you go to the volunteer tab at the top of the page, you'll see that you can learn more about the program and its kind of requirements and everything else, and then you can go right on through to the Apply Now page and apply right online. We also have a frequently asked questions page that I think is really useful in terms of answering many of the general questions that just because of time we don't have the opportunity to get to all of them right now. But of course you can feel free to look at the frequently asked questions page, take a look over other sections of the website, and don't hesitate to be in contact with us if you do have any other questions. Pippa is here every day in the office, ready to answer your questions as well. So and all of us are as well. If you need more information or would like to talk to a former volunteer or someone on the team right now, we're definitely excited to be in touch with you to answer any of the questions that you may have. So again, I think in wrapping up, I just want to say thank you to our former volunteers and staff that have been on the call with us. Thank you so much, Katya. Thank you so much, Mariah, and thank you, Peter, for sharing the current volunteer perspective as well. And again, thank you to Pippa as well for helping us through this conversation. We hope that you've all learned something and can't wait to see your volunteer applications to join us sometime soon. Thanks, everybody, and have a great evening.
Bye. Bye.